Hi, welcome to Culturally Determined. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade, and my guest today is Rachel Vorona-Cote. Rachel, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Rachel. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. So you wrote a piece that ran in Long Reads recently, and the title is "The Fraught Culture of Online Mourning." And I really liked this piece and thought it was worth discussing and would encourage other people to read it because I think it's kind of like captures the way that like life is changing because of technology and the internet. So we'll include a link below, and so I'll just read the very beginning of the piece, which tells the reader kind of what it's about, and is very very well stated. So you write, my mother died shortly after 4 a.m. in the pitch black of a November morning. By roughly 8:30 a.m. that day, the 29th, I had alerted my Twitter and Instagram followers as well as my Facebook friends. So yeah, I'm sorry for your loss, and thank you for writing about loss and grief in a way that a lot of people don't want to talk about it or express themselves about it. And you've been since I follow you on Twitter, you've been writing about this. I think I followed you when your mother was ill, and then when she died, you wrote about it online as well.
Yeah.
So can you talk about kind of why this is the piece you wanted to write right now?
Sure. I guess it's weird think about it as like I want to write about my dead mom, but I guess but I obviously have because this isn't the first piece that I've written about her, and in some ways I feel like the writing that I've done kind of all sort of built up to this piece in a way. It was sort of a way to think about the what had become, I had realized, a sort of ritual for me. I don't know. I don't know if you watch Fleabag.
I do. Great show. I just finished it a couple days ago.
Yeah, we're all just sort of reeling from that. Speaking of dead mothers and dealing with having a dead mother, and well, in Fleabag's case, a dead best friend too. Fleabag says something really. I don't think this is spoilery. She says something that I think is just really beautiful and heartbreaking, and also just I think gets at a lot of this. After her mother's funeral, she says in the second season, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't know what to do with all the love that I have for her. I don't know where to put it. And I think that, so I think me writing this piece, it's a couple of things on the writing that I've done. I think in some ways, I think it's honestly been a way for me, to, put my love and my grief places, figure out where to put it, because all of this love that I have for this person, that I'll always have for this person, that I was able to once direct at her, corporeal, being, that's changed. It's irrevocably changed. And now I have to figure out other ways to love her and ways to live in the world without her. And I tend to think through writing. So I think it probably, in retrospect, it probably makes sense that writing about her was going to be part of my grief process, mm-hmm. that I would just, be processing, what it has meant to live for now almost exactly a year and a half in the world without her. And so first that took the form of writing a lot of pieces that were very, strictly about, or not, if not strictly about mourning her, were very centered on that specifically. I wrote for Pitchfork about, the music that we listened to together. I wrote a piece, when she was dying, about how I was sort of, kind of anticipating that. But then, after all this time passes and I look at my Twitter feed and think, not without some horror, of just all of these tweets and all of these Instagram posts where I've just, I've really, talked a lot about just how much I miss her and chronicled, various anniversaries and what certain holidays have felt like, and how shitty Mother's Day is when all of a sudden you're unmothered. And I had the privilege of having a wonderful mother for 32 years. I know there are a lot of people out there who have, dealt with these things and have mothers that they've had to break contact with, and that, have had all sorts of really terrible and traumatizing scenarios. And so I'm coming to these circumstances late. And in a way it's a privilege, to love somebody so much that I'm grieving them so much. But then I started thinking about, well, gosh, this is, it's kind of a funny thing to be, to sort of just be, pontificating to all of these people, about this loss and to just sort of be building this archive, of mourning. And in a lot of ways, it has been something that's been really lovely, because, I think, Twitter's at its best, social media is at its best when people, sort of follow their best impulses and support one another. And,
it happens sometimes.
Yeah, that's what Twitter's good. But then you also start, or at least I start second guessing myself. Like, okay, when is this going to become annoying? Has it already become annoying? Twitter, whether I want this to be the case or not, is such an inextricable part of my professional life. So what does it mean that I'm also, mourning my mother there? Is something kind of like bonkers about that? I don't want my, we talk about personal brands and and it's a really disgusting term, but they exist. And it's like, I don't want part of my brand to be like mourning her dead mom, like dead mom writer.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a very long-winded way of sort of saying where, a lot of what was sort of, in my head as I was, working through this piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like I said, I encourage everyone to read it. And it does, as we, it seems like we're going to continue living our lives online more and more. There's been some backlash to social media and people deleting their Facebook accounts and stuff like that. But, sadly people are going to keep on dying. And so this is the kind of the future is it's going to be much more this than the way, it used to be. And I guess I might as well bring in my, personal story here, which is, I don't like I don't talk about it that much, so it's like a kind of a contrast to you. So I don't think I said it on the show before. And of course, there's no like right way to express grief. I think most people would understand that. My father died when I was 17 in the year 2000. So that was not pre-internet, but pre-social media. And
Sure.
I was kind of a like I like when I was in middle school, we got AOL, and I spent like a lot of time on AOL for that period at least. And so like I had online friends, and I had like Instant Messenger, AOL Instant Messenger, friends with people in my high school. But there wasn't. I don't think I. And even though I had like there was like one guy, like I was into X-Men comics, and there was one guy who was also into X-Men comics who was also a teenager who I like met at a comic book store one time, who I learned, in 1997 or so, which was kind of weird. Looking back on it, that my parents let me do that. But anyway, I don't even remember if I like told anyone in that who I like knew from that world that my father had died, because like I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want people to look at me as being like the kid whose father has died. And so so there wasn't like, the kind of the infrastructure was different back then, and there wasn't. All I had was my AOL screen name, which wasn't my real name, and there wasn't that connection between identity, personal brand, whatever. And back then, 17-year-olds didn't have personal brands, although I guess a lot of them have personal brands now. And I was thinking in preparing for this about how a lot of people sent cards, and I still have like the box of all the cards in my basement, 19 years later. And, and like, are there, and that was like, that's like kind of the gesture, at least that was the gesture in the year 2000. That was like, maybe you would come to the funeral, but like, if you couldn't come to the funeral, then you would send a card and like say something nice. And like, that's what we had come up with as the standard gesture. So is like the standard gesture now, like doing like a crying face emoji on the Facebook post? Like, did you still get a bunch of cards? How does it make you feel when it's just like, if someone you kind of know is just like sad face or heart on the Twitter post? Is that heading backwards from the, just buying a card and writing, saying sorry for your loss or something? So I don't know. That was a lot, but how would you react to that?
No, I get what you're saying. So I was very fortunate. I actually, Facebook I hate Facebook. I am mostly there because I put shit that I'm promoting there. But I did, because that was really the only place that my mom existed on social media. I did obviously post, about losing her, there. The way I see it, I think saying something anywhere is, now if somebody just responded to a post about, after my mother dying of ovarian cancer after 3.5 years, sad face emoji, I might feel like, especially if I knew them, I'd be like, oh, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. That just seems like super perfunctory and superficial, but I don't think that was, I think it was very fortunate that was not my experience. People left messages. I did, I received cards, generally from people that I know better, but not always. I received a lot of messages all over the place, emails, but even just commenting on an Instagram post, commenting on Twitter. I think for me, it's less for me about the mode or the form. My feeling is that it's just important to say something and to mean it. And, I think my sense is that we are still so ill-equipped, at least in American culture, to talk about death, to meet death in any sort of way, to just sort of grapple with it as, basically the natural conclusion of life. I think that it's just so important to emphasize. I think that a lot of people, understandably, just don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. They're very aware that saying, or I think that a lot of times, and I've felt this way too, even after losing my mother, having friends that have lost parents or siblings or people, pets, any entity in their life that's very, very dear to them. I think we sort of come up against this sort of question where we wonder, well, what does me saying something, what can that do in the face of the immensity of a loss that is just so hard to fathom? And if you haven't gone through a loss, then of course it's unthinkable, and it's horrible. And the thing is that, yeah, no one can fix it, but I think the important thing is that as long as that people realize that, you don't need to fix anything. You can't fix anything, and no one expects you to. And that's okay. The thing that matters is that you show up, for real. And that can be in any way, if you can come to the funeral and memorial service, awesome. Because God, that's a weird experience. And if you have the emotional bandwidth to send a thoughtful card or a note or an email, that's awesome too. But really, but I think and I don't think I'm just speaking for myself. I mean, I feel like any message that I received, it's not like I think back and, sure, I do, I remember I kept all of the cards that people sent me. But it's not as if I think about my friends and I think, oh, well, this person sent me a card and this person they commented on Instagram, as if, as if I'm weighing them against each other.
Yeah, and just sorry to interrupt, but just the box of cards, as far as I know, I've never actually looked through them. And it's been almost 20 years, and I've thought there's been times where I've been like, I should look through these. And I mean, they were mostly sent by adults, and probably people who were friends of my parents, so I don't really know. Like 17-year-old boys are not sending condolence cards to to each other. But it is just like there is this collection of things, and it was in my childhood closet for all the time until my mom sold the house, and then I took it with me. So it is almost like, just thinking about it, it is almost like a moment when language fails, and there can be some comfort in particular phrases, but a lot of it is these rote phrases like "I'm sorry for your loss" or "my condolences," and it's just it's more about the symbol or the gesture of showing up or giving a hug or something, and the words can't really do anything, and then that's interesting just to think about in terms of a like or a sad face heart or a heart emoji on Facebook, where those are also non symbols that are not language, and it's that's obviously tapping the key is less than a card or attending a memorial event or something, but it is kind of what can you say? And I mean, and I think, I
was, you know, I still feel like I was robbed of my mother too soon, but I lost her as an adult. I mean, I think the experience of losing a parent when you're when you're a child, I mean, that's a totally different thing. I think my youngest sister is in her mid-20s, and, I think between the lot of us, most of us don't have many friends, even now, who've lost a parent. When you're a child, I have to believe that's I don't even know if I knew anybody. I think there was somebody I knew of in my grade in middle school who had lost a parent. And yeah, I mean, and so it's, so that, I mean, that experience, I have to believe is just even more isolating. And I think that's a lot of it, that no matter, that it's just that it's a really isolating feeling, even if you're surrounded by people, even if, in my case, I'm fortunate to have a super supportive husband and a very, very attentive cat, and wonderful friends, and, it's still this alienating thing, because I think everybody's grief is specific to them, and you're still left with your thoughts. And so, yeah, I think that, again, it doesn't, I found myself not really, I don't really give a shit, if, if it's text or card or, carrier pigeon or I think for me, it just meant something that to get an earnest message, even if it was like a line, and I think for me now, something that I really learned because I prior to losing my mom, I am sure that there were situations where I learned that somebody lost somebody dear to them, and I didn't know, and I wasn't sure what to do. And so I probably didn't do anything. Now I know that if I'm ever in doubt, I'm just going to send the note. I'm just going to write the note, write the email, whatever. Because it matters. And I, other friends of mine who have lost parents, I think they've said similar things. Because it does matter. And I think we all just kind of have to slog through the uneasiness of dealing with death together, because we're all just kind of figuring it out, because we just don't. And I know that there are people who are working on it, and I think it's great. It's great that there are people who are writing about this and trying to help us all sort of understand death as a part of it all. But, we're still all kind of flailing.
Yeah.
When it comes to that.
Yeah. And I think, it kind of it does seem like one of those life events where you have to experience it to understand it, and just reading about it or talking to someone who went through it isn't gonna be the same in it. But then there is no like one universal experience. We've been talking about the differences between us, and and yet it kind of like, for every person, either their parents are going to predecease them or they're going to predecease their parents. I think those are the only two options. So it is something that like kind of mostly everyone has to deal with. So something I was thinking about, and you talk about this a little bit in the piece, is like, there's sort of a tone, especially to Twitter, maybe less so on Facebook. The Twitter tone, at least in the part of Twitter that you and I inhabit, is very sarcastic,
Yeah.
and if you're gonna like beyond sarcastic, like if you're gonna say something earnest, sometimes people say like this isn't a joke or I'm being earnest now, and sometimes even that's a joke. Like I've made jokes saying like
Yeah.
this is not a joke, and then say something that's obviously a joke, and it's just
Yeah.
it's a weird subculture that's
Very
evolved.
earnest tweet, and and I'm not, I mean, just the fact that people feel like they have to do that. But anyway,
Yeah. So okay. So then, you once you started talking about your mother being sick, and then about her passing away, like you shifted into a different mode than what is normal among like freelance writers and other media people on Twitter. So how did and like if I don't like even I don't know I would have to think about just based on you have like a serious Twitter persona. My Twitter persona is just jerking around and telling stupid jokes. And like, if I suffered, a major loss or something, would I even post it on Twitter because it's mostly just jokes, or would I keep it to Facebook where it's mostly people I know in real life? So yeah, I don't know about that. But can you talk about like the tonal weirdness of that?
Sure, yeah, and I think, and it sucks that there's just this extra layer of stress. I mean, it's hard enough to lose somebody, but then to have to like think about how am I going to package this,
Yeah.
or present this. Yeah, I think part of why I talked about it so openly is just to. In some ways, it was almost a mode of not exactly self-preservation, but a little bit, because I'm a very emotional person. I am incapable of really masking what I'm feeling. I have no poker face. I don't even think that I can consider honesty one of my qualities, because I actually don't think I am capable of lying. I think I'm just so bad at it that I've had to just default
Uh-huh.
to be honest.
Probably a good thing overall.
Yeah, but so for me, I guess I thought, well, God, I'm going to be a goddamn wreck. So maybe I just need to be, but maybe if I articulate it, maybe if I just, use whatever language is accessible to me and, write it out, maybe I'll be able to present this in a way that sort of paradoxically, in talking about how I don't have my shit together right now because my mom died, I'll look like I have my shit together a little bit more. Yeah, I mean, the shift for me, I think, was easier because I mean, every once in a while, I do, I too appreciate sarcasm. And a lot of my sense of humor does veer that way, but I honestly, I find that everything being layered under just like or everything having like 7 layers of irony over it. I just find that so exhausting. I can't do it. I just can't do it. It wouldn't come easily to me. I know everybody has to be in the world the way that they need to be. And if that's what works, if that's what helps you navigate, complex spaces, because Twitter is a complex space, then that's what you got to do. For me, I can't do it. I would just sound kind of ridiculous. I can't, I kind of learned early on that it's really not possible for me to be any other way than the way that I am.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I also, I also just sort of resist, the idea that, we need to not get too excited about things or this and that. It's like, come on, man, this isn't high school.
Although social media, one really good metaphor for social media I heard recently was it's like a high school cafeteria that's never ending. And so everyone is always talking about each other and overhearing things and getting in fights and stuff. So we're all back in this crazy world.
Yeah, and it's hyper perform. I mean, everything is performative, obviously, but it's just so hyper performative. And obviously, I'm performing too. We all are. I'm also trying, packaging myself. There are, believe it or not, there are times when I'm having a rough time and I don't tweet about it, and I make it, and it's really hard not to necessarily to not talk about it, but but just to not let it bleed through. But I make a really concerted effort. If I'm either not going to tweet at all, or, I'll tweet about stuff that has nothing to do with it. But yeah, it's, but the tonal shift is, but it is still there. I mean, mourning somebody, that is different from, me just talking about my feelings about an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and how it makes me cry. Mm-hmm. or whatever, various pieces of cultural phenomena that, mean something to me. It is a different thing. And I think, I think there is and I do think, again, I think it comes with it has come for me with a little bit of anxiety. On the one hand, it seems like maybe it's been helpful for people, because, seeing somebody talking about loss feels like, and I think should feel feels like permission to talk about their own losses. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, then great. I don't think anybody should bottle anything if, we're not, we're under no obligation to talk about anything we don't want to talk about. But if you want to talk about it, or if it'd be good for you to talk about it, then absolutely talk about it. So if that's helpful, then great. And I think when it occurred to me that it was perhaps helpful to people, then I thought, well, then maybe this will be something that I do, and maybe I'm a little bit more mindful about, and maybe do it a little bit more conscientiously, because perhaps this is something that we should be, if we're gonna, like you said, if we're gonna be on social media, and we're gonna be on social media, and, then we have to learn to live in the world and experience everything that the world flings at us, while also having these virtual personas. And so yeah, might as well talk about it. Might as well figure out, if, and that's me, I'm also, substantially more open about my feelings and about my life than a lot of people close to me. So so that's also something that I've realized I have to be conscientious about. That my grief experience is not my sister's grief experience. Right. They have to go through this in their own way. And so, just like, I in my writing, I never want to co-opt anybody else's story. I can't, I don't want to co-opt their grief or, my father's grief. I have to, I'm speaking for myself and, but yeah, it does come with, a lot of challenges. All of a sudden it becomes another task, that you have because if you're going to talk about something and you're going to talk about it in public, then you need to do it in a way that's conscientious.
Right. And so just another thing that's weird about the social media experience, especially Twitter is the worst about this, but there's like all these things are mashed together in a way that is either like chronological or an algorithm has decided that this is what you want to see. And
right.
So if someone posts something very serious, like their parent dies, the next post might be like a joke about farts.
Yeah.
And that's like, this kind of thing hasn't really existed before. I guess it's a little bit like if there's like some super serious news story on TV news and then they cut to a commercial about, laundry detergent or something, then that's kind of like the whiplash effect. But, it leaves the viewer or the reader or whatever in kind of a state of confusion. And, so if, I think that is one, and then it's kind of like, the post, you do the post and then it could just get lost, and the algorithms, show you posts that other people have liked more. And I think Facebook does this especially, and you'll see if someone announces that they got engaged or something, you'll see that post on the top of your feed for a couple days in a row because all these people are saying congratulations, and the algorithm has figured out that congratulations means something important has happened and more people want to see it. So there's all that stuff, but then it's also just like, how do you so like, this is similar on a different, but in a different wavelength. My wife and I had to put our dog to sleep a couple months ago, and a much beloved animal named Lima, and viewers probably heard her barking in episodes past, and she was on the older side, but we had been hoping we'd get some more time with her. But then so like, I did like a post on Facebook and on Twitter, and so that this was my like, first social media mourning experience, really. And I don't, it was, I like, there were people, some people just liked it or did the heart emoji or whatever on Facebook. Some people said, "Oh, so sorry, she was such a nice girl," and that kind of thing. And then then some people like sent me messages being like, "Sorry about that." But also I felt a little bit like, okay, so on Twitter I did like one post just saying like we had to put Lima to sleep. And then, like, the next day I just added, like, a little thing telling, like, little stories about it and more photos of her. And then but, like, part of my brain couldn't escape the fact that I was, like, threading content in order to make it appear more often in people's feeds so that maybe if someone didn't see the initial post, then they would see the follow-up and then they could be, like, alerted to it. But also these are, like, Twitter people, mostly not in real life people, so it's not like they met the dog exactly. Although I post photos of her, sometimes. So yeah, it's just like, I don't know what to make of it exactly, but there is this weird kind of, curating your life, announcing what it's gonna be like on Twitter. I didn't have to announce that we put our dog to sleep. Like that could have just kept on going, and I didn't announce it. I'm announcing it here on this show, for the Blogging Heads and Meaning of Life TV audience. So yeah, it's more of a, 20 years ago, like, that wouldn't have happened. Like, people care more about their pets, it seems like, than they did 20 years ago, but also, there wouldn't be, like, there's no obituary for a pet, and, only the people who really knew you would ever know that your pet died.
Sure.
Yeah, so it just, like, is a new world, and we're figuring out how to navigate through it, which is what I liked about your essay, because you're thinking about this. So let's travel back in time instead of forward in time and to the Victorian era, because you wrote a couple paragraphs about Victorian mourning rituals, and you are also the author of a forthcoming book, the title of which is "Too Much: How Victorian Constraints Still Bind Women Today," which we will include that you can pre-order on Amazon.
Oh, thank you.
So can you? Yeah,
You
so,
pre-order my book.
yeah, it looks interesting. It's a great cover, also, by the way. So yeah, so it is an interesting comparison, and a lot of it I didn't know. Can you talk a little bit about Victorian mourning rituals and what and also you can talk about your book a little bit?
Oh, sure. Well, so caveat: I'm not an expert on Victorian mourning, but there are people who are. So if you Google that or go to Google Scholar, you'll find far more in-depth and insightful writing on that. But it was highly ritualized, and a lot of that was. And so when I was writing about it, yeah, I mean, it as most burdens did, and and still do, it fell often to the woman. So if a woman lost her husband, and so often women were married to men who were much older than they were, so that wasn't strange. Or if they lost a child, and a lot of children died very, very young. She had before her a long mourning period that was highly regimented, mostly through dress. You'd be wearing a sort of crepe. You'd wear a crepe veil. You'd be dressed in black. There, for a certain amount of time, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, for a certain amount of time, the only jewelry that maybe you could wear would be pearls, because pearls symbolize tears, or they could be taken that way. Also the Victorians, they had a lot of really funky sort of death rituals. Maybe you'd have a locket made that had that you had a piece of your deceased loved one's hair, and you'd wear that, and then you'd probably wear that for the rest of your life. And so this was in a lot of ways a domestic burden. So this is something that you had to take on, and then there were very, very specific sartorial rules. Like after 6 months, what you wore. There were still rules in terms of what was proper etiquette for what you could wear, but they might not be as rigorous as immediately after the loss. Now, to be clear, I'm also talking about people who were relatively well moneyed, who could afford this. This would have been a very, very different thing if you were living in the London slums, obviously, and their death was all around you all the time. But then if you were a servant in the house, I think, often you'd probably wear a black armband for a time. But actually it's a sort of, kind of ghoulishly ironic thing, but a lot of the materials that this mourning material was, that a lot of the chemicals used to make these mourning garments were like really poisonous. So you could end. I think I mentioned this in the essay. Mm-hmm. So you could even end up. They could end up killing you. Victorians, great time. Great time for everybody.
Well, let me ask. So I mean, one of the few things I know about this is that like Victorians had a very different relationship to death than we do,
Sure.
and the Victorian cemetery was kind of like the proto public park,
Mm,
and they were designed to be like kind of in the same way that Frederick Law Olmsted designed Central Park to be like these wilderness areas as like the city continued to like encroach on the natural areas. There's one in Rochester, New York, where I live, that is supposedly the first one, called Mount Hope Cemetery, where people to this day like jog through it and walk their dog through it. But yeah, I think the Victorian era people would like go on a picnic and at the cemetery. And I think in some cultures this is like still done, but so yeah, I think so. It's because death was all around them a lot more. Like you said, the children were dying in infancy a lot more often, and yeah, so they were kind of forced to reckon with death more than we are. Whereas often today, death is treated in a very antiseptic way.
right.
And
And it's cordoned off in a way that it just really couldn't be in the Victorian period. And so yeah, that's not, it's, it was a terrible thing that people were dying from diseases that, we could then find, that we then found vaccines for, vaccinate your kids. like, but, yeah, they also, they're also Queen Victoria, after she lost, her husband. I mean, she just took mourning to the next level.
Right.
I mean, she, and I mean, she loved, Albert. And that's, that's it's a wonderful thing. But yeah, I mean, she was reading Tennyson's In Memoriam. And she, and she was the queen in mourning. That really became a trademark after she lost him. So the Victorians also had, they had their monarch who had really, in a lot of ways, sort of redefined the monarchy, and really emphasized her role as a domestic, as a wife, as a mother, even though she really hated being pregnant and breastfeeding and all of that. So they were looking to this monarch who obviously took her mourning very, very seriously. And I guess, the thing that's sort of weird, and a lot of that, yeah, it's very, as most things were with the Victorians, very intense, very regimented, very patriarchal. But yeah, every once in a while it did, I would think, God, it would be great if on a day when I actually have to go somewhere, even though I feel really, really crappy, if I had a several foot long black train behind me, know that I had lost my husband or my kid and I felt really crappy, and so please leave me alone. or just tip your hat to me and step to the side. It's sort of like in The Sims, you have the little diamond that spins above your head, and did you ever play The Sims?
Just a little bit. I missed it a little bit, but it indicates the emotion that the little character
how well
is feeling.
doing,
yeah.
Basically. But I mean, it's also, it was more for you to realize, if your Sims diamond was red, it was meant that they might really need to pee, or they were just really unhappy. Maybe they were hungry. Anyway, but yeah, it's having this sort of little signifier that lets people know. But but when you're just walking around in the world, I think one of the really hard things about grief, that I encountered really, that I realized very quickly, is that just the world doesn't stop. I mean, obviously it doesn't. It's the most obvious thing. Your world feels like it is halted. But, I would have these you know, my mom died, and I had a book deadline, and my publisher was great, and they gave me a little bit of an extension, but it still had to happen, and I wasn't going to feel. It wasn't going to make me feel better to keep putting it off. So so the next thing I know, the same year I lose my mom, I write a book and that's, or write the first draft. And, and even now, I'm working on, I'm revising it, and it's, these things are difficult, that, as, it can be really, we all know it can be just really hard to live in the world anyway, when you lose somebody, or, something really just catastrophic happens in your life. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean that it's changed anything else about the rest of the world, and you have to figure out a way to navigate that. And hopefully, the people around you will help respond with empathy. But everybody else is just trying to do the best that they can too. So it's just it's just hard. It's really insufficient, but as you said, there's no real language for it. It's all just very hard.
Yeah, you remind me of one of my favorite poems, which I, as a younger person, memorized and don't remember all of it, but it's at the Musée des Beaux-Arts by Auden, and it's all about about suffering. They were never wrong, the old masters or whatever. But yeah, it's about, how life goes on when Icarus falls into the water, but life goes on. The dog is scratching himself, or the horse is rubbing against the tree, and the ship sailed calmly on, or whatever. And
the painting that it's based on, where you have all of these things happening, and then it's just off to the side that you see just, like, is it just his hand? Like,
yeah, you see him like falling into the water in just a small part of this.
His whole body, yeah.
So I think that's an eternal truth that life goes on, as we say. Just one thing I was reminded of with the Victorians, I had Brandy Jensen on this show a couple months ago, and she is a well-known Twitter person and also writes an advice column. And in a previous life, she was a English PhD student studying Victorian literature. And I asked her if she ever applied her Victorian literature knowledge to giving advice. And she said one thing was that a lot of the questions she gets are about, like, how do I tell a person what I really feel about them? Usually right. They like them. And, she said, like, the Victorians had this system of, like, flowers, and, like, you would send flowers to someone, and a particular flower would mean a particular thing, and that was maybe a better system than what we have today of, I don't know, liking their Facebook post or their Twitter post or something like that. So there was some things the Victorians got right. Would you say that? Because kind of your book is about how, as I understand it, the strictures that Victorians placed on women, like, continue to exist to today.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, so actually, I didn't know that. I knew that Brandy was also an erstwhile academic. I did not know it was for Victorian literature like me. That's
so literature was you were studying literature?
Yeah, Victorian literature. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
The basic premise is this. Well, so the title, Too Much, it basically just comes from an extremely ubiquitous comment, saying that somebody's too much or they're a little much. And as somebody who pretty much has felt in various ways from the time that she was very little that she was too much, too emotional, too talkative, too, exuberant. I became very interested in, and admittedly I've made up a word, I became very interested in the different ways that too muchness, the way that it manifests itself, I think that what's interesting about this idea of being too much is it's really perniciously vague. It can mean anything. If you say that somebody's too much, there's almost certainly an emotional component to it. You're probably talking in some way about how they express themselves, but it can also mean that they're, I don't know, too sexual, too horny, that they're too, then maybe that if they have live with a mental illness, then maybe that is expresses itself in a way that is uncomfortable for you. Maybe they cry too much, talk too much. Basically, they're not behaving in a way that we in our culture have sort of tacitly decided is comfortable for the vast majority of us. And so and it was interesting to me coming as somebody who studied the Victorian period to think about all of the hysteria diagnoses at that time, where women were being diagnosed with hysteria left and right. And one of the funny things is that when you research hysteria and when you look up doctors' definitions of hysteria, it is often just a very long list of adjectives describing various heightened emotional states of, women being anxious or, really distressed or, and so, it kind of, in a lot of ways, hysteria, this is reductive, but it feels a lot to me like sort of like the too muchness diagnosis, that all of the ways that women are taught that they're too much, that they need to be packaging themselves smaller, corsetting themselves. They're not, and a lot, and it, as we know, there were women that, were dealing with having been sexually abused. There was trauma in their life, there was all of that too. But it ended up, but there were, it led to a lot of stigma about, and I should again emphasize, I'm focusing primarily on women. Obviously, this is not something that is exclusive, to women. But, I just, in terms of sort of keeping the purview, the parameters where I could actually, do it justice, that's sort of where I'm keeping my eye. But yeah, and then, women would, they would be hospitalized, sent to asylums. If you've read The Yellow Wallpaper by Perkins Gilman, it's a short story about this woman who's being forced on a rest cure, which ends up doing more damage than anything else. And she's not permitted to, exert herself intellectually or physically,
That's one of the scariest things I've ever read. I read it, as I was probably about 17 when I read it, and we were traveling, so I was in a hotel room, and there was wallpaper. I don't think it was yellow, but there was wallpaper, and it scared the shit out of me. I haven't reread it since then.
Oh, it's terrifying. But every little thing was, a symptom of, you're too agitated, or it feels to me, and I don't think that this is any great surprise. There are a lot of reverberations, if we think about the way that we talk about, or that the way Britney Spears has been talked about since 2007, and the way that she has dealt with mental illness, and there, I mean, there are more examples than I could possibly include in the book. I mean, they're everywhere. But there's a whole, we have so many sort of expectations for the way that women are supposed to be friends with each other, that we get, that's its own thing, that are women who are really close, are they queer? Or, what does it mean? Or, if you have a friend breakup, what, is it okay that you're as upset about that, or maybe even more upset than you were about breaking up with a boyfriend? Like, and so obviously a lot of this is really tied to, white heteronormativity and, but I think, basically what I'm trying to do, at least, with, to a decent extent is, to gesture to this and, maybe help us to think about this and then hopefully, suggest that maybe we think about, the fact that there are so many different ways of living in the world, and that maybe we could be a little bit more accommodating. I mean, because we're just really not, particularly emotionally, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, on Twitter and tone and how we feel as if, how we feel as if we, express something on Twitter, it needs to be done in a certain way that's not, too much. That's not too excited. We want, that's not, too over the top. We don't want to, there's such an emphasis on being just the right amount of blog. Sure. Just, somebody who actually I think has helped this sort of trend on Twitter is, Lin-Manuel Miranda, who's just really adorable and just exudes earnestness. Now, obviously he is extraordinarily famous and well loved. And so but sometimes you need somebody who has that kind of platform, to indicate to everybody, oh, hey, maybe it's okay. Maybe it's okay to just like say what I feel about things. I mean, it's okay to just be forthright, and not feel as if I have to perform this sort of, perform chill, to go back to Alana Massey's, wonderful, essay against chill from a few years ago. It's so I think ideally we'll see more of that. We'll see, we won't be so completely, agitated if, we're in public and we see somebody crying, they're having a physiological response, and, if you feel cool asking them if they need a tissue or a cup of water, that'd be great. Otherwise, you keep living your life, you let them live their life, and it's just like little things like that, that I think really are, they're more, granular and episodic, but I think they're all a part of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could have an entirely separate conversation, I think, just on this topic of how people present themselves on Twitter and their emotions. One way to, I think there was a study actually that like showed this, that the more like emotional language you use in a tweet, the more retweets and likes it gets. And Trump is one example of this. And another is like the, this pair of brothers who recently got kicked off Twitter called the Krasensteins. Everything was always a 4-alarm fire, and it was always, this is an emergency, you need to retweet this in order to defeat Trump. Whereas like the same information conveyed in like a neutral tone would not get 1,000 retweets. So that's I think people figured out that in some areas there's a cynical strategy of acting like you're always turned up to 11. It's always an emergency. We're all about to die. The only thing you can do is retweet this. So yeah, and so that's interesting. But
happy medium, yeah.
yeah, something between Trump and Trump Krasensteins. I mean, they're kind of mirror images of each other in a way, and yeah, something in the middle. It's interesting. Lin-Manuel is interesting. I followed him when Hamilton came on the scene, and then unfollowed him because for my personal preference level, it was too kind of sappy. And whatever. And his co-author Johnny's son actually blocked me at one point because I think I sent him a snarky tweet. So I can't see Johnny anymore. But okay, we're probably about at the end of our time. But there's one other thing I wanted to ask you about that you write about in the essay, which is the Facebook memorialization.
Oh yeah.
So can you explain what that is?
Okay, so it's still a little confusing to me, and to be clear, like my sisters and I haven't done it. I mean, our mom's page is still there. But Facebook has a team for this. So if somebody dies, you can. And I'm not sure, I forget exactly how you do this, but I guess you get in touch with Facebook.
You probably have to show like a obituary or death certificate or something, I guess.
Yeah, they'll change the page so that it's like in memory of or something like that. So it's clear that this person is deceased. Doing that, the benefit to doing that is that you won't be asked to tell this person happy birthday. Things like that are like celebrating so many years of friendship on Facebook, and,
right.
That all of that stuff, which, sucks. But, for me, and so I think it's a useful tool. I personally, I think at the first time that I feel comfortable getting off Facebook, I probably will do it. And so that will just be that. But there are, because my mom was there are so many pictures and things that is part of it for me. A lot of her friends are there. I think Facebook has become, it's sort of in an odd way, it's kind of become a space for an older generation, to keep up with each other. And, if that works for them, then, that's lovely. I really wish they weren't stealing all our data, and all of that. So there are benefits. I honestly, I think when Mom died, it just didn't even occur to me, like with everything happening, letting Facebook know that she had died was like, that just did not, it did not register. I would assume you could probably do it at any time. And then I'm not sure how it works. I'm not sure if you need to show a death certificate or anything like that. I imagine that there is some protocol. I mean, you have to, because otherwise people would be pranking each other, and setting up memorial pages for their friends because, in 8th grade, that's a thing that is like super, super fun and cool to do.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe beyond 8th grade too, if you're in college and drunk and
fake your frenemies death or something. I can see that being something kids would want to do.
So obviously, so they're going to need to verify it, but and if I remember correctly, I think you could still write on their wall. So like if you want to say, write the person messages, I think you can do that. But yeah, it's I think in some ways it's a useful mechanism, but right now Facebook probably has some bigger other things that they should be attending to,
Yeah, there's lots of interesting things that you could just stemming off of this. Like, yeah, Facebook has, a lot of younger people don't use Facebook, and certainly like people in high school, as far as I know, are not using Facebook at all. Like, they never even got a profile because it's so lame. It's full of old people. So then as time marches on, more and more people who are currently using Facebook are going to be no longer alive, and their relatives are going to have to deal with this. I hope you and I both outlive Facebook, but I don't know what the likelihood of that is. But I was thinking, like, I don't know if I would want my Facebook page to be the memorial to all whatever I accomplished in life is, starting in 2005, and like pictures of me and my friends at parties and stuff, and then trailing off to just be like posting links to these videos. That's pretty much all I post on Facebook these days. I don't know if I want that to be my memorial. So hopefully, hopefully something else will happen to Facebook and it'll get broken up or fade away or something. And then there's also like, you must have seen this. There's a lot of funeral homes have, I assume as part of their standard package now, like they'll create a thing that's essentially like a little webpage for each person with a guest book, essentially. So it looks like something from 2003 when I've seen this. And then it will like have an obituary and people can leave comments. That's it's a throwback, but it is like, kind of just like a simple thing. And you don't, they're not going to harvest the data, I assume, for some nefarious purpose or something. So it seems more innocent in a way than like the current like apocalyptic evil social media landscape.
Yeah, no, I wrote my mom's obituary, and obviously with really great input from my sisters and my dad. But yeah, so I remember that. It was kind of like charmingly old school. I wrote it. I sent it to the funeral home guy. Called it. Talked to him on the phone. It was all very sort of like analog. But yeah, and then and then there were and then there was a guest book. It felt like it's like a GeoCities.
Exactly. I had one of those.
Me too.
Back in the day. Yeah. Okay. So we've gone over an hour, so we should probably end it there. But
Sure.
so the piece will be linked below. The piece, The Fraught Culture of Online Mourning, at longreads.com, and then your book again, which comes out next January, is called Too Much: How Victorian Constraints Still Bind Women Today. So thank you for talking about this subject, which is emotionally fraught, and and just thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, well, thank you to our viewers and listeners as well, and we'll see you again next time.